And we cut across to breaking news coming in at 2 p.m. as the US State Department has ordered the destruction of networking equipment and computer workstations and the dismantling of the embassy telephone system in Kyiv. Republic has been getting you non-stop details on what is happening in Ukraine at this point, as the US especially is emptying its embassy, and this is the latest that is coming in. US State Department has ordered the destruction of networking equipment and computer workstations and the dismantling of embassy telephone system in Kyiv. The situation certainly becoming more critical, and Abhishek joins us live from the Delhi newsroom. Abhishek, what's the latest on this front?
Well, so this seems to be a sort of a throwback to what happened in Kabul, Swesha, last year in August, when the Americans were leaving the Bagram Air Base and their embassy. They carried out this exercise. So perhaps it's an SOP or a standard operating procedure when an embassy is evacuated. Some would say the Americans have actually started believing that a war is imminent, and that's why, as we heard their spokesperson Ned Price yesterday say that the embassy is being moved from Kyiv to Lviv, and the Kyiv embassy is essentially being shut down. So I think connecting it with what President Zelensky of Ukraine said yesterday in a Facebook post, which was also televised, that they could face an invasion or an attack from the Russian side by Wednesday, that is tomorrow. I think Americans just adding to it, it's building up. The two armies given to themselves, the Ukrainians on one side and the Russians, are not equal armies. The Ukrainians happen to be much smaller in size, but then just because they want to really increasingly integrate themselves with the West, identify themselves with the West, and eventually become a member of NATO, which is essentially a defense alliance, and hence seen as a threat by the Russians, given the fact that NATO would then have access to Russian borders directly through Ukraine. It's not just about Ukraine, through other nations also. The Baltic nations that have become members of NATO, for example, the NATO already has access to Russian borders, but this would be one more, almost sealing the entire front of, or the entire border of Russia from north to south, which connects it to west, with NATO on its border, so that buffer state principle is gone, except for Finland perhaps, and that's something which has really guided President Vladimir Putin of Russia's actions and thoughts, and all this mobilization that we are seeing now. It's a long-standing belief with Vladimir Putin, Swesha, that he is not going to accept NATO's expansion any further. So we saw it in 2007 Munich Security Dialogue speech, which he really followed up by acting on the ground, by taking some parts of Georgia. Then we saw in 2014 how Crimea was taken back from Ukraine, and now we are seeing a clear brinkmanship. Even if Russians, for example, claim that they are doing it only because they have mobilized for war games. Remember when we did Operation Parakram in 2001, 2002, that was essentially an exercise to really make a point across to Pakistan and to make it look real. The mobilization was done in a manner that it could have led to a war. So even if the mobilization is in the nature of a war game, a defense exercise, or to make a point, some miscalculation on the ground can lead to things going out of hand. So situation tense. That's why, for example, the Ministry of External Affairs and the Embassy of India in Kyiv, they have issued an advisory to Indian citizens, and it is hoped that if Wednesday passes, perhaps things might start sort of calming down. And the reason why I say this is, Niranjan, that because yesterday in a meeting between President Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, there was a hint in the dialogue that took place between the two leaders, and which was perhaps intentionally televised and then brought out in public domain. And that was that Lavrov said that there is still scope for diplomacy, and President Putin approved of it. So I think there is still hope and some leeway available for diplomacy to work.
Yeah.
But then on the ground, situation tense, and that's why advisory finally coming in from the Indian side as well.
Taking off from what happened yesterday, Abhishek, we're getting in a statement now. In fact, even the Russian media, putting out statements to the effect of how Russia is willing to engage in diplomacy. Just reading out from a statement that came in a few minutes back from Russian agency TASS, that Putin is willing to hold talks on security issue. A Kremlin spokesperson has said, and that's also the breaking news here on Republic TV, that Putin willing to hold talks on security issues, according to the Kremlin spokesperson, saying Ukraine is just a part of the problem. It's a part of the bigger problem of security guarantees for Russia, is what Dmitry Peskov has said. That's the Kremlin spokesman. Abhishek. Abhishek. Abhishek, did you get
I think
that?
I missed the question there.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to tell you about what Kremlin has just said, that Putin is willing to hold talks on security issues, saying Ukraine is just part of the problem, taking off from what you said about the body language and hinting at some sort of diplomatic route being kept open.
Well, obviously, Ranjan, so if you look at it, nobody really wants a war. Ukraine, of course, would perhaps, a good part of it would be devastated if an actual war happens. And if it's NATO versus Russia, God forbid, the numbers could be scary in terms of loss of life, destruction of property and whatnot. Also look at it this way, that the economies are so intertwined, almost 40% of energy needs of Europe are taken care of by Russia. The gas coming in through the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. And that is the reason why perhaps you have seen, Niranjan, that while Americans have been very uppity about it, you have seen very conciliatory comments coming in from the Ukrainian leadership itself. Also, France has been talking about, giving more space to Georgia rather than war. We have seen Germans refusing to supply weapons to Ukraine. So I think there is this thought in a greater part of Europe that war could be devastating. They have to make a point because they don't like President Putin and his autocratic style of functioning. He's almost seen as a strongman dictator, and that's the positioning. Democracy versus dictatorship, and that's why I think it's an idea for which this contest is happening. Whether it would lead to war, the statements that have come in from top leaders in the last 48 hours seem to suggest that some rethink is happening. But as I said, any miscalculation on the ground can really lead to things going out of hand, essentially because of the kind of mobilization that is there. But then from Boris Johnson to Emmanuel Macron to Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, the new German Chancellor, to even Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, I think, and now, of course, President Putin also yesterday, there is a sense that ultimately war might be averted. It's a throwback to, I would say, the Bay of Pigs or the Cuban Missile Crisis, where very intense diplomacy between Kennedy and Khrushchev at that time led to de-escalation, with the Americans deciding to take away the quarantining of Cuba, and the Russians in turn deciding to pull back their nuclear-tipped missiles from Cuba. So I think something similar might happen in terms of diplomats finding a way out of de-escalating, but until that happens, situation is very tense on the ground.